All right, everyone. How's it going? It's Mostrino here. As you can probably tell by the title, I'm going to be doing a breakdown of how I made my remix of My Eyes Betray Me by No Matter. Now, a project breakdown is something that I've wanted to do for a very, very long time, but I've never actually fully gotten around to, finishing it and then putting it out. So hopefully this one, if you're watching it, obviously, yes. Hopefully this one's the one that actually gets out there. A few disclaimers before I go into it. First things that I'm going to be turning ozone elements off just because it uses a lot of CPU, and when I'm trying to run OBS and the project at the same time, I want it to play smoothly. And the other thing that I've got turned on is Smart Disable, which can get a little buggy sometimes. So, yeah, if it sounds a little bit different, that's why. For the ozone elements, I've got it turned significantly down, so I highly doubt that it's going to be clipping. But if it clips for any reason, then that's why as well. And the other thing is that usually I've got FL Studio on two monitors, so whenever I click to open like a plugin, even like an effects plugin, it's going to open on the other one, and I have to drag it over, just so you guys know. So, that'll take an extra second, but that's fine. So, yeah. Before I actually go into the project file, here it is. Here's what it looks like in all its glory. I guess I should talk a little bit about how the track came to be in general, in conceptual terms. Because, I talked a lot about this in the description of the upload, but, if you guys don't know No Matter, he's got a new alias, but No Matter and I have known each other and been working together, not necessarily on, like, tracks, but on content for quite a while. He's been making music for a long time, and I've been supporting his stuff, and then the other way around is true as well. And yeah, he was coming to me saying he wants to put out this remix EP for his first ever EP under the new alias. It's gonna be distributed everywhere, and if I wanted to be a part of that, and of course I was gonna say yes. And it wasn't like he was like, okay, so I'll have you remixing My Eyes Betray Me or something like that. He was asking, which one do you want to remix? And this one was the one that I chose because I felt like it had probably the most amount of potential for me to really kind of work with it and put the ideas that I had into reality. So, yeah, again, huge thank you to No Matter for giving me the opportunity. And again, if you haven't listened to the remix yet, I'll put links in the description to the YouTube upload. It's the upload right before this, but I'll put that there, and then it's on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Music, so you can check it out. But also, if you haven't checked out the original or anything, or the rest of the remix EP or the rest of the original EP, I definitely recommend that as well, especially for the original of this one, because it really helps to know like how different this remix is from the original, if that makes sense. Because if you're listening to a remix and you haven't listened to the original, you can't really know if they like completely transform the track or if it's just a few changes. So listening to the original as a reference is probably something that might be certainly worthwhile, aside from the fact that it's a very nice track in its own right. But I'll tell you right now that the only like stems that I got from the original, which was because these were the only ones I had asked for, were just dry vocal stems. So everything that's not the vocals, that's all me. And I've done quite a lot of processing on the vocals as well, but I'll talk about that in just a moment. And something else that I want to point out here, I don't know how noticeable it was for you guys listening, because obviously I'm used to it because I've listened to this a ton of times because I made it. But the verses of this remix and the original track are in 5/4, and the choruses are in 6/4. So yeah, it would be interesting to know from you guys. Let me know if that was like noticeable, if it was like the rhythm was kind of wacky there, or if it was smooth. But yeah, that's one thing that I should point out already, is that we've got these time signature changes throughout the song, and nowhere is it the traditional 4/4. It's switching between 5 and 6, and I thought that that was really neat that No Matter did that in the original track. So of course I wanted to preserve that for the remix. And one one more thing, I know I'm saying a lot before I'm even jumping into it. Um, once you're done watching this, if you liked this, breakdown or anything, if you think it's interesting, please, please, please let me know, and say so. I probably won't go back to my old project files and or like to the old project files of the tracks that I've already released and break those down just because it's been a while since I've looked at those project files, so I wouldn't really be able to explain everything as well as I could have at the time. But if you tell me, that you enjoy this, you think it's interesting and whatnot, then certainly I'm much more likely to do more of these as I come out with more music, hopefully not too long from now. Anyways, let's play this intro and then I'll talk about what's going on in there.
My eyes betray me, my mouth delays me, my words escape me. You cock your eyebrow, I hope that somehow that doesn't stop me from getting to you, finding the true you despite the fake me. Break down the walls of stone so they fall down, I wish that for me.
Alright, I guess I'll just go top to bottom. So first things first, we've got the vocals, and we've got this reverse reverb, just taking the vocals, putting a ton of reverb on it, and then reversing that to, tease the vocals and go into them very smoothly.
My eyes betray me, my mouth delays me, my words escape me.
Alright, so let's talk about the processing on these vocals. First of all, let me just play how they sound like without any processing. These are basically the vocals that I received minus me, cutting them up a little bit.
My eyes betray me, my mouth delays me, my words escape me.
And then again, here's with all the processing.
My eyes betray me, my mouth.
So, I mean, obviously, a pretty massive difference. So let's just walk through these one by one. So first things first, and yeah, like I said, I've got to drag these over, but, So, just a bit of EQ, taking out whatever lows might be from the original recording and boosting the highs a bit. Next up, I've got no TT. If you're unfamiliar with no TT, basically imagine OTT. I mean, everyone knows OTT, right? Except you've got more control. You can, there's a ton more macros, and you can even go like into the individual compressors themselves and tweak those if you so choose. So, making it a bit brighter and more compressed.
My eye.
And, putting a bit of more of the air into it. Then we've got this TDR Kotelnikov, which is a free compressor. Sounds very, very good, at least in my opinion. And this is the main thing that's bringing the volume way up, just making it mostly louder, but also smoothing out those dynamics quite a bit.
My eyes betray me, my eyes betray me.
Because you'll notice later on in the song, the vocals get much louder. So if I just, turned up the volume of the whole thing, then these would be way, way, way too loud. So I want to make them a bit more even, because these were definitely too quiet for the production that I was planning. But again, I can't just turn them up or else these will be, explosively loud. So that's why compression comes to save the day, because it makes the quiet ones louder, but it doesn't make the loud ones too loud. And even to further do that, I won't do a before and after because it doesn't really change in the quiet section. But basically, I've also added kilohertz dynamics, and basically what this is doing, this flat bit at the top is saying that left to right is input gain. So here is really quiet, here's really loud, and then up down is output gain. So that's what's coming out, like that's what you get after you apply the effect. So this is all one-to-one, it's very normal, but here's where it's saying if it gets really, really loud on the input, we're not going to continue that like one-to-one relationship. We're not going to make it any louder than this. So that just further helps for the very loud sections to not make them any louder. Then another EQ, just boosting the highs even more. And I even added on a limiter. I, again, won't do it before and after because it's not going to change in the quiet section. But, you know, just to really make sure that all the dynamics are under control. Then I've got a fruity balance that I believe I'm just automating throughout the track. This fruity delay, I'll talk about it afterwards. And then here we've got this patcher. Basically, if you haven't used patcher before, what it does is patcher's basically a plugin where you can put more plugins. They don't have to be stock. They can be, as you can tell, I've got non-stock plugins in here. And you can just put them all into this one thing and like, you know, make the order whatever you want. So I've got, you know, from this input going into 2 different processing lanes. And I can do that all in just this one instance of patcher. So you can put as many plugins as you want. You can route them however you want. You know, if I wanted this to be routing to here and then, you know, the pancake to be going to this one, but also to another plugin, maybe to 2 other plugins, and, you know, make it as complex as I want. That's what patcher is for, which is really useful because if patcher didn't exist, you'd have to use multiple effects lanes or mixer tracks, I should say. So this, I'll do a before and after, and then I'll talk about what's actually going on in the patcher. So before,
My eyes betray me.
and then after.
My eyes betray me. My mouth.
So as you can probably already guess, it's doing the reverb, but it's not just, you know, if I just wanted to add reverb, I wouldn't have done a patcher. I would have just added reverb. So what's going on in here basically is I've got 2 lanes. The first one's just the dry.
My eyes betray me.
And then the other one's just the wet. And basically, the first thing that I've got in here is TDR Nova. If you don't know what TDR Nova is, it's a dynamic EQ, which basically means that the amount, like the level of each band is determined by the gain going into that band. So in this specific example, I've got it so that the highs are reduced more if the highs coming in are louder, right? Like the louder the highs, the more I want you to push them down. Because with a normal EQ, you push down the highs and it's, you know, they're being reduced by the exact same amount throughout the entirety that EQ is on. But this is why it's called a dynamic EQ, is because it changes relative to how loud the audio coming in is. And this is only on the wet. I'll just turn the dry mix to 100% and then look at the difference in the wet. So this is without it. So listen to how long those like S's are being reverberated and how loud they are. And then here's what happens when I turn it on. I mean, what a huge difference, right? All of those S's are almost, you know, gone from the reverb, but I've still kept them in the dry vocal, of course. I don't want it to just sound like there's no S's or anything. But taking them out of the reverb makes it so much smoother. And yeah, TDR Nova even has like a nice like visual reference so you can actually see how much the band is clamping down on those frequencies depending on the input. So you can see that when you're getting those S's, it's acting much more harshly. Because I don't want it to be turning those down constantly, because then when those S's aren't playing, then the normal vocal's going to sound really muffled, which I don't want. Then I've got the actual reverb, supermassive. And the reason why I just turned this down is because sometimes when I open the plugin, the delay resets to 300 for some reason. So usually I've got it around here, so I'd imagine that's probably where it's at in the actual project file. And then this last thing is this pancake. You probably noticed when I was playing the reverb that it's panning around. That's what this is doing. It's not like super panning around. It's only on 19% mix, but doing a little bit of panning helps it, you know, have more movement and stand out a bit more. So, I wanted it to be noticeable but not distracting, which is why it's not like 100% panned or anything ridiculous like that, but rather just that 19%. And then what this peak controller is doing is I'm routing the dry signal to this peak controller, and I've got it linked to this fruity balance here. And basically what it's doing is it's making the reverb quieter when the actual vocal is coming in. Because if I didn't have it, it would sound like this.
My eyes betray me, my mouth delays me, my words escape me.
Which isn't bad,
My eyes betray me.
but the dry vocal kind of gets lost underneath all of that reverb. So what this peak controller is doing is that when the dry is playing, then that reverb gets quieter so the dry vocal can shine through. But then when the dry vocal isn't playing, then the reverb goes back to full volume. So you can still get those nice reverb tails without drowning out the dry vocal.
My eyes betray me, my mouth delays me, my words escape me.
So yeah, that's what that patcher is doing. Basically, this whole thing is just shaping the reverb to make it sound like what I wanted. And then the reason why I've got the two lanes is so that this can help the dry vocal punch through and not be buried by the wet vocal. And then here I've just got a few more things, turning the highs up even more. And then I've got a wave shaper to boost the vocal quite a bit because it was still much quieter than I wanted. So before.
My eyes betray me.
And then after.
My eyes betray me. My mouth delays me.
So that's basically the processing on the vocal. But like I said, I wanted to talk about the delay. Because here, I want to say that No Matter did this in the original as well. I'm pretty sure, but I'm not certain. But basically, the vocal line says, my eyes delay me. So, how clever to put an actual delay on it, just a little bit of word painting there. So when he says delay, it delays. You get what I'm saying?
My mouth delays me, my words.
Right?
My mouth delays.
So yeah, that's just what the delay is for. It's literally only for that one word and never shows up again in the entirety of the remix. But I mean, hey, it's those little details that can make something, just so much more, interesting.
My eyes betray me, my mouth delays me, my words escape me.
And yeah, again, just to recap, before,
My eyes betray me.
after.
My eyes betray me.
Again, a lot of it was just getting those like frequencies, like in terms of like the EQ and those dynamics where I wanted them. And then of course, putting work on the reverb. Now let's talk about the other stuff that's in here. We've got a little bit of ambience in here. And this ambience, I've got a lot of ambience, like a lot of the ambient samples that I use are from Cymatics Life Packs because, well, first of all, they're free, but also they've just got a lot of really nice, like natural ambiences because they're like actual recordings of the ambience. So if I check this one, Rain on Roof, sounds like this by itself. And if we take a look at the processing that's going on here, I've just got some reverb on it and doing a bit of filtering, taking out the lows and the highs. And I'm bringing the highs in the intro. And just having little ambiences like that in the background can really help to add much more like texture to the sound because you've got, real sounds from nature that are just kind of layered over the track to really get that atmosphere nailed down. And then I've also got this ambience as well. This is also from the Cymatics Life Pack, but this one's Rain. Well, just Rain instead of like Rain on a Roof. Same processing. And you can tell that I've turned these way down because I don't want them to be distracting. I want them to add to the atmosphere, not take away from it. Finally, I've got this pad that I rendered out to save CPU, but I'll talk about how I made it and I'll open it up actually, but let's just play it first. And aside from, like, these are the only things that are playing the chords in the intro. So I can talk about the chords here as well. As you can tell, it's quite a few layers, and there's some processing on there as well that I'll talk about. So let's just break these down one by one. This first one I made in Phase Plant. If you're not familiar with Phase Plant, insanely powerful synthesizer. I'm only using like 0.1% of its power here. And one of the greatest parts about Phase Plant that you can't find in something like Serum or Vital is such a powerful sampler. So I'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, let's just break this down. And let me take off the... oh, wait, there's no processing on it. It's just right to the sidechain. So first layer is just this... well, without the detuning, it's just a saw wave. Right? And then I've got it detuned and spread really far. And if we want to talk about the processing on it, first is just getting rid of those highs so that it's much more subdued. And then getting rid of those lows so that I don't have any problems down there. And then just adding a ton of reverb, making it, much more ambient. Right? And then the other layer, and this is why, again, Phase Plant is so powerful, because you can't do this in particular in Serum or Vital with the types of, because I know they have samplers, I know that, but this has so much more versatility to it, and being able to process these in the same patch is just so useful to the workflow. So here is, I just dragged in an ambient sample from Kashmir, and it retuned it, and it's playing the notes. Right? And then being able to do that, because a saw wave, it has a very analog digital sound, but being able to take some sample with a lot more texture to it already and then build off of that, just makes the process much easier, and you get stronger results. So I've got this on unison as well, detuning it and spreading it. And then I've got some processing on it as well. Let's take 4. Adding a little bit of crunch, but very, very little, and mostly just making it more present. Then I'm taking out a little bit of that high end, but not nearly as much as with the saw wave, just so that it can sit more in the background, and then just like with the saw wave, adding some reverb. So then together, so you'll notice that thanks to Phase Plant, I'm able to have the majority of like the timbre of that sound be this, but then have the body of the sound be strengthened by the saw wave. So then let's talk about the rest of these. All of these are from Labs. If you don't know Labs, it's a completely free plugin with a ton of samples that you can get, and some of them just sound great. I'll let these play, and I'm doing a bit of processing on them, turning them way down though. But the classic no TT, and of course, taking out those lows just to, make sure there aren't any problems. All of those have really lovely, like, timbres to them. So those can all just help to really shape the sound. So, putting these together without the one that I made, we've got this. And you can hear them all contributing to that sound. And then when I add the one that I made, so yeah, you can really hear it all coming together, and that helps to make a very nice sounding, soft but full layer to carry the vocals, because in this intro, it's literally just that, the vocals, and little bits of ambience. So I needed this to be able to stand on its own, and having all those layers allows it to do so. So we've got that, and then in the second half, I add in this higher one, also from Labs. And these are all from their textural pads pack, but I mean, they've got great stuff outside of that as well. A lovely piano, for instance. I mean, drums. You can see all the categories in here. Great stuff from them, and I mean, it's free, so of course you should get it. And then here, I've got it locked to be off, just because it uses so much CPU. But I'll play it anyway. This is another one that I made. And you'll see it's got Valley of Hope in there because I originally made it for my Valley of Hope remix, which you guys haven't heard. But I still intend on finishing that and putting it out. But that's off topic. Basically, the way this works is here I've got the sample of a piano into the sampler. And what I'm doing is I've got this loop mode on so that the original sample plays, and then this loops, like this would loop this part right here, but I've got the start of that loop set to a random modulator, so it's looping a random start, and that start is constantly changing from the tail. So what that means basically is that instead of it just being the piano, I play it and then it just fades out, the part that would normally be fading out is looping, but at different sections, so it's sounding, it has like this weird, like granular almost kind of sound. And I'm bringing those way up with the dynamics. You can see what this is doing, that if the input gain's low, doesn't matter. We're making that output gain up here. I've got some no TT and some, I won't go too deep into the processing because if I do this for every single sound, this video is going to be like 6 hours long, and no one wants that, I'm sure. But basically, this is the main thing. And if I play it, I actually rendered it out, so we don't even need to worry about that. Watch this. I can just go into here, the granular pad, and just play it. So it has the timbre of a piano, but it really is, in essence, a pad. Because I've got delay, reverb on it, and I've even got it reversing into itself. So it has this very ethereal kind of dreamy feeling, which obviously you're not going to get if you just play a piano normally. So then those together with this, we've got and then with the rest of the ambience. So again, just very, very nice. And with all those layers, it's enough to be, to carry the vocals. Because again, that I just played is literally the only thing underneath the vocals in this first part of the intro. And then we've got the bass coming in afterwards. But I want to talk about the chords first. While the choruses have a very nice, resolved feeling, the verses not quite as much. And I didn't want to undermine that by having a resolution at all in the verse. The only time that the chord actually resolves is at the very end, right before, or that the chord progression, I should say, actually resolves, that it plays the one chord, is at the very end, right before the chorus comes in. So the very first chord, we know that it's in D major, but that very first chord, instead of being the D major chord that we expect, we get a little bit thrown off with this B minor. And B minor is the relative minor of D major, so it would be as if we were in B minor, but we're not. Those vocals really have D as the root, so as a result, when you've got those vocals playing over this chord progression, that there is a feeling of it not being quite resolved. And that's, even putting aside the fact that minor one chords in general tend to not feel as resolved as major one chords, but especially when they're not quite lining up with the vocals, that further exacerbates that sort of tendency. But I didn't want it to be like outright dissonant. So I've still got, B minor. It still has those two notes from the major 1 chord, but it's not that chord. Aside from the very first chord, we've got this C sharp here playing throughout, and the C sharp, when I'm talking about, D major, I mean, it really wants to go up to that D, but I'm holding it for a very long time, relatively speaking, to keep that unresolved feeling as long as possible. I still hit that root note here, but not in that major 1 chord to kind of keep you hooked. So then that way this resolution feels much nicer because we've been waiting 15 bars to get to it. So yeah, that's what's going on with the chord. So that's why when you hear that first hit with the My Eyes Betray Me, it's not a very nice, major 1 kind of intro. It's got that uneasy feeling to it, which is what I was going for.
My eyes betray me, my mouth delays me, my words escape me. You cock your eyebrow, I hope that's
right. Getting that, and I hope that feeling is conveyed well when you're listening. I mean, you as the listener would know. And then in the second half, and also if you're wondering what all this automation, well, this one's for the delay, but the rest of it, I'm changing the parameters on the no TT just because the vocals themselves aren't completely even with the frequency, so I had to compensate for that so that what you hear is even. There's not one part that has much more high end than the other, so I'm just automating that to keep that all level.
from getting to you, finding the true you despite the fake me. Break down the walls of stone so they fall down. I wish that for me.
And I know that the bass isn't super, super obvious because it doesn't have the sub in it. I'm saving that for when the chorus actually comes in so that it hits a little harder is definitely not the right word to go with because that first chorus is not intended to hit hard at all. And I don't want to say more impact because that's kind of saying the same thing, but not having the sub and then having the sub is going to make more of a difference than bringing the sub in earlier is what I'm trying to say. So if we take a look at this bass, it's this deep reese that I use in like every single track. I mean, some of my older ones don't have it, but Restless certainly had it. And I know that like Numb and I think the 4 Kids in a Trench Coat tracks had at least some variation of it, like a more primitive version of it. But yeah, and all of the, well, not all of them, but like the vast majority of the stuff that I'm working on has this somewhere in it. Because basically, I can break down the patch here as well. But let's just play it first. And normally it has the sub in it as well. But like I said, I have that turned off for this specific instance of that patch. But the reason why I like it so much is because, at least in my opinion, it does a very good job of filling in the bass frequencies without being intrusive, which is really what I like to see. Let's play it one more time. And basically, what's going on in here is I've just got the I Can Has Kick wavetable, which is actually a Serum wavetable. I'm using Serum wavetables in Faceplant because this is a good one. And just a saw, but I know it doesn't look like a saw because it's got, it's kind of messed up. Like it should be looking like this one, but it's got a lot of stuff in it that I'll talk about in just a moment. And then just a plain saw, no detune or anything. These are being detuned. And the reason why these look so wacky, or why this one looks so wacky, is because I've got this complex FM not only doing phase modulation, but also frequency modulation on it, and at very high amounts too. I mean, in Serum, 50% isn't that high, but in Faceplant, 50% is very high. And I've got this modulator adjusting the wavetable position of both this FM wavetable and the I Can Has Kick wavetable so that it has movement, right? So when I play it, it's not just this like a static sound, but it's evolving. And I know that that kind of movement is not really that apparent with how it's processed in this specific remix, but yeah, I mean, even just visually, you can see how much you can see them moving around and whatnot. But yeah, I'm able to put it so high up because this is just one of 3 layers. And then I've got a lot of processing in here. This one's for the sub, so I don't have to talk about that right now. But yeah, mostly it's just distortion. Of course, no TT, that's got to be in there. Taking out the lows so that the sub can go in there. And taking out the highs so that it's not intrusive. And yeah, really that's it. And like I said, this is, you know, in a lot of the stuff that I'm working on, and Restless is already out, so I can use that one as an example. Not only can it be unintrusive when needed, but it can also be very present when you want it to be as well, because that like vibrato bass in the last drop, like that huge drop in Restless, that's this. I'm just opening up the filter and, you know, increasing the distortion a bit and whatnot. Because when you're using, you know, gritty wavetables like this and doing some FM, you can get some very, very powerful sounds. But the nice thing is that if you process them right and filter them down, it still has that power in the bass region, but it's not intruding on the rest of the mix. All right, and then finally, we're finally done talking about the first like 30 seconds of the whole track. It's been already an hour in my recording time, but I'm not going to give you guys like a 10-hour video or anything. I'm going to go into this and cut it down and whatnot, and hopefully it's a much more reasonable size for you guys, because I'm sorry if I talk a little bit too much, go a bit too deep into the processing and whatnot. I know I shouldn't be talking about every single detail, but I also want to make sure that I don't forget anything.
I wish that for me, 'cause I'm here. Every word I say, I just can't clean out my act and send it away. 'Cause sometimes life says what I'm thinking of, in other words, stays up to it. But I really mean it, though you don't feel it every day.
Alright, so that's the chorus. I'm not going to talk about the vocals because those are just, I mean, they're being processed the same way they were in the verse, so nothing's new with those. And hopefully, I mean, if you're not wearing headphones, if you're listening on like a phone or anything, then obviously not. But if you are wearing headphones, you should hear how much of a difference bringing in that sub in the chorus makes. And it looks like in this specific track, I've separated the sub and the bass. Usually I have them in the same patch, but the reason why I didn't for this one was because I actually wanted to distort the sub with Camel Crusher rather than the Kilohertz plugin, so I had to separate it. And plus, you can see that I've got, I mean, I could have done this in Faceplant, but, you know, separating them also helped me mix them more easily. But yeah, I mean, the sub, just a distorted sine wave, but, you know, filtered down so it's not too crazy. And without the processing, you can tell that that Camel Crusher is making a big, big difference. Because I know that this is a chill section of the track, but that sub still gotta have some beef. And then with the bass, and yeah, that bass really helps bring in the width in the mid region. So those work together very nicely, at least again in my opinion. Here we've got a piano. Let's take a look at what's going on with this one. Okay, yeah. So this actually has no processing on it. It's literally just key zone. But the one thing that I'm doing is I've got the attack turned up, because normally when you play a piano, it doesn't fade in. When you hit the note, that note plays. But if I did that here, I feel like it probably would have been a bit too distracting. So having it fade in helps it mesh with the pads much more, because the pads have that sort of fading in kind of quality. So I didn't want the piano to clash with that. And I know now that we're in the chorus, the vocal is more resolved. But actually, I know this might be like, oh, I can't believe you're saying this. Doesn't this just go against what you were saying just earlier? Because I know last time I was like, the vocal's unresolved, so we've got to have the chord progression be unresolved too. Because here what I'm doing is the vocal's resolved, but the chord progression still, the one chord is not anywhere here. And you might be thinking, then what was the point of making the verse unresolved? I thought you were going to make the very nice, satisfying resolution for the chorus. Because obviously I did it at the end of the verse, but you'd think I'd do it in the chorus too. But hear me out, right? I was playing the long game here, right? I'm not talking about unresolved verse so that we can resolve in the chorus. I'm talking about unresolved verse, unresolved chorus, unresolved verse, and still not very resolved chorus, so that when I get to that big part, that when you've heard the remix, you know what part I'm talking about. Then when you've spent like 3 minutes without that much of a resolution, imagine that impact from there when you finally get that huge relief of the tension that's been building up throughout the entirety of the track. So I'm playing the long game here, like I'm saying, I know that it's the chorus and it's a resolved kind of feeling, and I could have played into that, but then when I actually resolve it in the biggest part of the remix near the end, that resolution wouldn't have nearly as much of a harmonic kind of impact, because we've gotten that resolution so much before that we've gotten used to it. And I don't want you guys to get used to it until we get to that part, so that's why you're not seeing the one chord anywhere here. And now the one chord's actually in here, but it's kind of hidden. It's this chord, this third one, which, at least to my ears, that doesn't feel like a super, huge resolution, so I'm able to sneak that one in here. Especially because it's the third chord, which is kind of an awkward place for the progression to feel really resolved. And then here, I've got the piano not only playing the chords, but I've also got this part following the melody because of the vocals. Because if you hear the vocals here, it's sounding like this.
Sometimes love says what I'm thinking of.
So I'm trying to complement, and you'll notice, look, I'm doing it with these guys as well, and with the pads that I've bounced out, and with the bass. So it's sounding like this. So it's still getting those chords in, but also following the vocals, and you can hear it with everything else.
Sometimes love says what I'm thinking of.
The one where it's probably the most obvious is the strings and the brass, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment.
Sometimes love says what I'm thinking of.
And I just thought that sounded pretty neat. And technically it does hit the one chord in the second chord here. But again, doesn't really feel like it. I'm sneaking it in a little bit. And then here's probably the biggest tease for the resolution. All I need for this to resolve right, if I just did the exact same bottom two notes but brought this C sharp up one semitone, boom, you've got your resolution. And the vocal, even like I've said already, the vocal is very resolved during the chorus, because the vocal even does that.
Though you don't feel it every day.
right? There's that root note right there. But nope, I'm not giving it to you with any of the instruments, with any of the chords or anything. I'm going to make you wait for it. So I've got it's so close with that leading tone right in, really wanting to go to the root note, but nope, we're not doing it. Not yet, at least. And I just keep you on there. And I feel like more than, not just hitting it in the verse at all, or, not, or kind of hiding it in the chorus. I feel like this is the biggest part where it's noticeable that we're not resolving just yet. And even here with the bass, I kind of follow the melody as well.
But I really mean it, though you don't feel it.
And you'll see that there are two MIDI, and actually, now I realize that this, on top of wanting to use Camel Crusher, was probably the biggest reason why I separated the bass and the sub, is because I'm having them play different notes. Because here, I've got the bass actually a whole octave higher than the sub in this section. And then also here it's also an octave higher. So I'm separating the notes a little bit, so that's another reason why they're not in the same patch. Now let's talk about these. First up is this brass. Now if I take off the processing, sounds like this. And if you're asking where did I get these from, these are the same guys that made Labs. This is the BBC Symphony Orchestra, and they were giving this one out for free. I don't think they are anymore, but they were giving it out for free, and it's got great sounds on here. And a lot, you'll notice when I talk about the strings too, those are from here as well. So great sounds, like symphonic orchestral sounds on here. It's got brass, but it's also got woodwinds, percussion, strings. And yeah, I mean, it does sound nice by its own out of the box, but I definitely wanted to process it. This is just good old no TT, of course. I mean, we've got to have it. So this is the main thing that's shaping the sound, and you can tell that it's giving it a more aggressive sound because I do want it to still have some impact even in this chill section. And then just taking out the low so it doesn't clash with the sub, and then turning it down. Alright, so that's basically the brass. Not much more to talk about in that section. The two layers are horns and bass trombones, in case you were wondering. Next, strings. If we look at these layers, I know it looks like what is even going on here, right? There's so many notes in this MIDI, but it's literally just the chords in like 6 is definitely an exaggeration, but in like 3 different octaves. But I know it looks much more complex than it is. Yeah, don't worry about it. So this first layer is just Labs. Yeah, Labs has strings as well, and they sound really, really good. Again, in my opinion, but I mean, I definitely think they sound really, really good. And I know that they're panned pretty significantly to the left, but I just kind of left it like that. And yeah, there's almost no processing on them, just a low cut. And then when we're talking about, I call it symphonic bass because it's a bass from an orchestra instead of like an electronic bass, but obviously that's not like what it's actually called. And this is from the symphony orchestra. So that's covering the low notes that these strings didn't reach. And finally, I'm just adding an extra layer of violin. Also from symphony orchestra. So all together. And again, with almost no work, you get a really, really nice, sound. Again, all I did was the low cut and put the MIDI in, just because these sound so good. So again, definitely worth checking out if you're looking for sounds like these. Now, let's go to the next element. These two are just the same as before. Right? And then just normal rain. But I added more stuff. I've got this, which actually isn't from Cymatic's Life. This is from a direct pack. And yeah, it's just birds. And if we're looking at the processing on this, it's reverb. And then, because without the processing, it sounds like this. And I mean, if I had just left it like that, that would have been, you know, way too distracting. So, of course, I want to add some reverb on it, and I want to tame, not even tame, just remove some of the really harsh highs, and, of course, remove the lows. And then that way, not only does it sit much more nicely, but having those birds in the background really helps to nail the atmosphere that I was going for. You know, a very natural sound. Because this first bit, aside from the bass and the pads technically, is really all like organic instruments, and even the pads are kind of made to like to cushion that and sound organic on their own, despite being electronic. So adding actual natural ambiences like birds, and also this one that I'm about to talk about, which is more birds, which is actually from the Cymatic's Life pack. So I mean, they contributed to the birds as well. So together. Again, just, you know, having those in there adds to that atmosphere, which is what I'm looking for. Then I've got this. Which is an ocean, again, from Cymatic's Life pack, but adding that, well, first of all, in the state that it's in, kind of having that soft noise in the background really helps fill out the mix. But if we're looking at the processing on that, without it, it sounds like this. So really, I'm not doing much. Just putting reverb on it and turning the highs down. Right? And again, just having that helps fill out those frequencies and, you know, make it sound more full. And then, of course, the pads from the verse. Don't need to talk about how they're made because I've already talked about that, but I mean, that's in there as well. And then only two other things. This, I'm pretty sure, yeah, this is just a Cashmere sample, Sweep Down 10. I've used this one a ton in particular because it's just a white noise, like, splash. You know, give the chorus a little more impact. And then the other thing, this guy, is that I'm just, for the very beginning, because I don't want it to just, like, have, like, an attack, like a transient, that would really throw you off as a listener. So everything but the vocal, I just fade in really quickly. Like, without it, it would have sounded like this. Which I think is a bit too aggressive. So I faded in so that it's much smoother. It's a subtle difference, but at least in my opinion, an effective one. And then, yeah, that's how I've got like this huge kind of like cushion of sound for this first chorus.
I wish that for me, 'cause I'm every word I say, I just can't clear.
Yeah, it's basically just, you know, the vocal stuff from Phase Plant, Labs, Symphony Orchestra, and Cymatic's Life, and, you know, put those together, do some processing, and boom, you're good to go.